Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Popcorn Wind Down. I'm Eddie.
And I'm Tammy.
Thank you for joining us. This week we start off with a word from our sponsor, the Love Shack. Want a romantic weekend where you can have all of your fantasies fulfilled? Well, the Love Shack has got you covered with new and improved experiences. Check out the adult playground where you can play and stay as long as you want. No matter your status, we've got you and your desires covered. You will never leave the Love Shack unsatisfied. For more information, call Love Shack or check out loveshack.com. Sounds like we were just serving as pimps. I don't know if that's legal. Never mind, the check cleared.
Okay. Do not make me liable by asking me no questions, Eddie.
I think I need to start asking more questions.
Oh.
Okay. So this week, we say goodbye to one of our favorite shows, Love Victor, which is a show about Victor Salazar, a gay teen coming of age in Creekwood, a fictional Atlanta suburb. And this final season 3 picks up exactly where season 2 left off, with Victor showing up at the door of one of his love interests. And we find out immediately who he chose. But before we get into that, Tammy, what did you think about this series finale or ending of Love Victor? Did you love it or hate it?
The first 15 seconds of the show, of the new season, was well worth the wait. I was one of those people. If you haven't already listened to it, go listen to our last episode on Love Victor from last year. And know that I was definitely on Team Benji. And I was just like, as he rings the doorbell, I'm like, this better be Benji's house. This better be Benji's house. Like, that was my whole thought process the whole entire time. This better be Benji. And then when the camera turned to who opened the door and it was Benji, I was like, yes. And then, like, by the end of the episode, I was like, well, shit. It was like my hopes just, oh my God, like just everything just being dashed away. And I think that's kind of how I felt about the season. It had a lot of promise based on the main story. And then that promise just kind of was unfulfilled throughout the season. What about you?
Yeah, yeah, I love the series. I will say that we've loved the series. We've reviewed both seasons. Season 1 was our very, very first episode. And listening to it, I will admit it's kind of cringy, but it just kind of goes back to show how much we've grown, how much the show has evolved, how much we've evolved. So aside from our own critiques and our own growth, so Love Victor will hold a special place in my heart just because it was the first show that we ever did. And then the second season, for those of you who want to go back, it's episode 2, it's season 2, episode 25, where we review the second season of Love Victor. So I will say that. Like I said, this show holds a special place in my heart. I got the feeling from watching it that they did not intend for this to be the final season, that Hulu just kind of threw them that curve. And I hate that, that it didn't get a proper ending. You can kind of say you're satisfied with where it ended, but you also realize that this wasn't where they intended to end. I would kind of hope, and since no one has kind of picked it up by now, I think it's done. But I would have at least wanted them to give them one final season to wrap up the high school years and to truly properly wrap it up. So I will say that. But unlike you, I was not Team Benji. First season, I was Team Benji, and second season, I was I didn't see Benji being in game, and this season did nothing to change that. It actually strengthened my resolve that Benji was not in game, that he shouldn't have been in game, and I felt like by the end, they were trying to force it. I get that he's the first love, but sometimes you grow apart. And I really wanted to see what Victor and Benji would have been like as friends. Um, I'm not even saying Raheem may have been in game, but he was. That's just where my mindset goes. Sometimes in shows, you start off with one idea, and just based on chemistry and where you allow the story to naturally go, it ends up with somewhere else. I'm not talking about forcing a whole Dawson, a Joey and Pacey type thing. Um, but I'm talking about just naturally allowing the chemistry and the love interest to go where they go. But Benji and Victor were never it for me, and this season didn't do anything. So when he showed, I kind of knew it was going to be Benji. So when he showed up at Benji's door, I was like, okay, maybe they're going to do something to convince me and change my mind. And they didn't. It wasn't great for me as far as Victor and Benji goes. And I think part of that is we never got to see them be friends. Like we saw the friendship with him and Raheem. We even saw how it developed with him and Nick, but we never saw the relationship outside of lust or whatever they want to call it, quote unquote love, what Victor and Benji were like as friends. Um, Even when they were hanging out at drag bingo, it got too heavy, and it was like they didn't know how to communicate or just be friends or just be around each other. Like Victor said, it was always so hard with them. And I think that was kind of my turn off with that relationship. What about you? So what turned you off of Victor and Benji this season?
They were never given a chance. I think just the hardness of choosing alcoholism to be Benji's thing, and then him trying to figure out how to do that. Like, everybody knows when you're an addict, no matter what your addiction is about, um, you don't do relationships. It's best that you don't do relationships. So uh, going the alcoholism route, but then at the same time trying to sell the relationship of him and Victor, that's what didn't work for me. I think that if the writers hadn't chosen such a hard thing to be a blockage for their relationship, they would have been better, and I would have been fully behind it. But because of that, my whole thought process was, no, it is true. Like, he does need to get away from all of his triggers and to just heal himself. And it was kind of like they wanted him to do that, but at the same time, they were still trying to sell the whole Benji and Victor is end game. And I'm going to be one of those people, we're going to have to disagree on that. I do think that in the future, Benji and Victor could be endgame, but I do think that they needed to grow apart. And it was never an opportunity for them to truly grow apart before they were forced back together. And then it was a bone that they threw that was not satisfactory at all. Like, I'd have thrown the bone right back in their face. If I could have, I'd have thrown the bone right back in their face, because I thought it was just something they threw together at the end. And so it was very, very disappointing to me on it. I just don't think they did Benji and Victor justice. I don't even think they did Benji's story of being an alcoholic justice, the justice that he deserved to have on trying to just get himself better. And I also think that Victor never truly understood what it meant to be an alcoholic, and what was needed for Benji to heal. I don't think he really, and I may not fully remember how much research he did last season, but I just think that this season he wasn't as understanding of the hardships that Benji was going through. But I'm okay with that. I mean, like, he's a 16-year-old boy, so I definitely get that. It was too much for him. It was too much for them. So I could see them being apart and then getting together later on, but we would never get to see that because the show ended.
Yeah, I can agree with that. If they were gonna, like I said, I think I said last season, I was resolved to the fact that Benji would probably be in game, although I wasn't a fan of it. But I agree with you. Um, like I said, this season felt like they were trying to force it. Um, and okay, so he does end up at Benji's door. I get that. Once he and Benji decide to get back together, and then you figure out that Benji is still drinking and he has to go to rehab and all of that. When he comes back and he tells them they can't be together, because you're right, within they tell you that within the first 90 days, sometimes even longer, of you working a program, you should not get into a relationship. You need to take that time to heal, to work on yourself, to figure yourself out, and all of that kind of stuff. Um, so I get that. So I think that they did a horrible job of explaining it and tried to make it seem like it was all Victor's fault. And I agree with you in the sense that Victor did not seem understanding about why it was. And I'm with you. I don't remember how much research he did last season. So I think they dropped the ball on being a supportive partner, and Victor realizing that, hey, because once Victor realized that they were not going to be together, I think he did a good job. Like, I liked the parts where they were apart. I liked that better. I liked Victor being with Nick. Just going from having casual hookups to him and Nick actually getting into a relationship. And I actually liked Nick. Um, you know, the evolved version of Nick, who seemed good for Victor. I liked that Benji was becoming friends with Raheem, and that they were both doing their own thing. And I kind of like the fact I saw that if it would have continued, that we would have actually gotten the chance for Victor and Raheem. I mean, not Victor and Raheem, but Victor and Benji to actually be friends and develop that friendship that they never had. And then if in the future, maybe season 4, season 5, however they chose to break it up, because in this one they would have been juniors, because when the show started they were sophomores, so you could have given them a senior year and broke it up into 2 parts, but so and if in that case they did come back together, then it would have made more sense. But yeah, it did feel forced because um, his triggers don't just go away. Because if Benji really did figure out his parents were his triggers, um, and they weren't supportive of his relationship with Victor, then how is that going to work if you're not getting away from all of that? So it's still, it just, I don't like the way that they forced it. And like I said last season, I I I'm not I wasn't Victor and Benji in game. I actually was more of a fan of Victor and Raheem being in game, and that didn't change for me. Um, I saw, just from what I got, I kind of saw the relationship with Connor going somewhere else. Like, he started off cool, but then and I don't know if it was just because Raheem, this was Raheem's first boyfriend, but you could kind of sense some of the changes, or some of the things that some of the areas you could have seen that relationship going, especially when he was like, well, Connor says gossip is this, or Connor says this, or Connor does that. And it's like, wow. So, but yeah, I agree with the whole, um, they didn't really do the Victor and Benji storyline justice. What did you think about Lucy and Lake?
Non-starter. I mean, it was cute, but it was background noise to me. Like, they were cute together, but at the same time, I'm like, yeah, you're not going to last. Like, I don't even see them being together in the future. I also thought that their love relationship was rushed. And y'all literally just got together, and granted, I know teenagers fall in love quickly. I get it. But like, I was just like, whatever happened to just developing your relationship naturally before you're automatically in love with the next person that you're with? But yeah, and then another thing is like with Lucy, like, I understood why Lucy wanted to leave town. Like, I got that. And when she explained the reason why she was always sad and how she wanted to get out of Creekwood, I was just like, I'm all for it. Like, do what you feel you need to do. But it's the same thing with Andrew as well when we get to that. You ultimately change your future just to be with your high school girlfriend. And I don't think there was really growth or development based on that. So, yes, at the end of the day, Lake and Lucy was a non-starter for me.
I didn't necessarily. I did like them together. But I agree with you that it was maybe too much. And I get why initially Lucy wanted to leave. I understood that, and I thought, wow, that was, it was better than just, oh, me and my stepmom don't get along. Like it went deep. It cut deep, and um, I don't necessarily see them being in game. I know that, and I don't see, and I'm glad that we got the chance to see that what that Lake and Felix were not in game either. That they really were better off as friends. But I didn't necessarily see Lucy and Lake being in game, but I did love their relationship and their friendship. I liked that they were at least exploring it. And yeah, with you, it's like, and you kind of get why they clung to love so hard, especially Lucy and Lake, given the fact that, their history with their parents. So they were clinging onto that love where they could find it. So I kind of get it. Maybe looking for love in the wrong places, but I understood why they were clinging to it the way they were with each other. And so, and like I said, it kind of, I hate that it was canceled because I would have really been interested to see ultimately how these stories played out. Now, you brought it up. So Andrew and Mia.
I
I
want you
was
to tell me what you think.
I was so glad when she decided to move to Palo Alto. I think we talked about how last year Mia had become one of our least favorite characters, and that was one of the things we agreed on. And after her whole thing with Victor, her whole relationship with Victor imploded. It's not like she served much of a purpose. And I loved Andrew in all his. I loved Andrew in all of his scenes, like when he was comic relief and when he was with everyone else. But when he was in Mia, when he was with Mia, they turned him into something that was so far. Like I liked seeing this nicer version of Andrew, where he went from being the bully and the asshole to being a great friend. But as far as a boyfriend, it was a little bit creepy and stalkerish. Like they turned him into this
Yes.
obsessed puppy. And it was like, dude, I get it. She's really your first true love. I understand that. And there's a line between being a good boyfriend and being an obsessed stalkerish kind of boyfriend. So I don't like what they did to his character. So I was so glad that she was moving. Because I liked him in everywhere else. Like when he was talking, when him, Victor, and Raheem were at the coffee shop and they were trying to put up Victor's profile photo, and he's like, "Hey, you want to borrow one of my selfies? 90% of my phone are shirtless selfies."
And they were like, of course it is.
Yeah. So, and he's like, "Do you want my advice?" And they're like, "No." Just things like that. So when he was hanging with the bros, like him and Victor getting high, not condoning it, but they took a great, just regular moment and they turned it into something so heavy. Like, just let him cut loose and have fun. Like, that was the perfect moment for him and Victor to just be so silly and out there. And you kind of want to see them tripping out on the couch like the two other idiots were. But it's like, why can't you just? So I hated what they did to Andrew in order to make him be with Mia. So I was kind of glad. I was like, okay, well, maybe if there would have been a season 4, we wouldn't have seen her as much. They would have realized that, long distance is hard. And Andrew could have found another love interest. I don't know. Maybe even Lake. I know that goes against girl code and everything. I don't know who it would have been, but bring someone else in for Andrew because Mia was not it. What about you?
I'd have been okay with Mia and Andrew bouncing out and not being in the show anymore. I understand that Andrew is comic relief, and don't get me wrong, he did make me laugh a couple times. Just on the outrageous things that would come out of his mouth, and I'd be like, "That's so Andrew." But yes, I thought it made him very, very pathetic on how he was running behind Mia for everything. And she never truly noticed the changes that he was making in his life for her. And then when it came down to it, and they're talking about the fact that in order to fly to California with her, he gave up playing in the last game of the season where there were going to be scouts. And it's kind of like, I understand, do you feel a little guilty at that point because she had just made the decision to move where her dad is. But at the same time, I'm just like, no, that's where you need to have a tough conversation. I understand you're 16 years old, but you need to have a tough conversation and stick to it. Like, I get it. He loves you. Definitely. He changed for you. Great. But at the same time, is that the healthiest relationship to have where he completely changes his whole life for you? I didn't fall for it. Like, I was not a fan. Mia, she wasn't really there. And then Andrew, I'd have been okay with him not being in the show either. I do like the connection that he had with the other people in the show. I get that, but I wouldn't want him to be connected to anybody else. Like, I wouldn't want him to all of a sudden get with Lake or anybody else. Like, no, if Andrew's gonna stay, then he would have had to have his own person and bring his own girl in or something like that. But yeah, I thought that was the relationship that showed failure more than any other relationship. You are not going to last. You are 16 years old. You're moving literally across the country. Like, no, y'all aren't lasting, like, at all. Like,
Yeah,
you might as well just break up now.
yeah, and we get that. As adults, long distance relationships are hard, but as kids, and everyone wants to give it a try. When you think that you're that in love, but I don't see it. And like you said, I wouldn't have wanted to see Andrew with Lake either. I would have wanted to see him bring in his own person, his own girlfriend, and have that happen. But
I,
I, you know, I
no, go ahead.
go ahead.
No.
I
I was gonna say that throughout the whole season, the one thing that I got is that Andrew and Mia were more best friends. Like, they gave off a best friends vibe than a forever love vibe. And that was
Yeah,
another thing. Like, everything that he did for her, like, that shows the true friendship that they had. Like, he was going to be her ride or die friend. Which is great, and that is what she needed through everything that she went through the season. But I just didn't see the love. But I did see the best friends forever vibe, BFF forever vibe between her and Andrew.
yeah. And I don't know if it was the actress and chemistry or what have you, but I didn't get it. And so I like them better together than her and Victor, obviously. But like we said last season, and I get that she was heartbroken about her relationship with Victor, but it also seemed like, she was trying to force it. I think we talked about how she was trying to force it with Victor to hide her feelings for Andrew, especially after they hooked up and stuff like that. So I don't know. Mia was just a hard sell for me. And just her, I don't see her and Andrew being in game either. So when they had broken up, I wasn't sad about it. I was like, oh, okay. So when they got back together, and then she's like, we'll make this work, and I'm like, but how? Like, y'all need to have real conversations. He cannot. Besides it being way too expensive, and I get he was rich AF, but besides it being way too expensive to fly back and forth every weekend or every other weekend, what were you doing? Like, he said he was coming to you. You never once said that you were coming to him.
Yes.
Basketball season. He can't miss games and still expect to get a basketball scholarship like that. So it was just like a lot of the real conversations they need to have about the how to really make it work. And that's why I know, because I don't care how rich I am. My 16-year-old son, 17-year-old son is not flying halfway across the country every other weekend to be with his girlfriend, especially if there are other ways like FaceTime and all these other ways to keep in touch now. It's not happening. So yeah, we know the real, we know that that was not going to last. Um, my favorite character still by far, Felix. I love Felix. Um, I loved him and Pilar together. What did you think about that couple?
They ain't gonna last either, but they were cute while they were together.
Um, I kind of saw them as ultimately. I think that was headed where we said Benji and Victor should have headed. I think that at the end we knew that they broke up. They were cute, and we knew that they had broken up, and they didn't get back together. But I also kind of saw them ultimately being in game. Like I loved how they kind of put him and Lake back together in that moment where where they both were broken up from Lucy and Pilar, and they realized that, hey, we have baggage and we have history. I won't say baggage, but we don't have a future. Our present and our future is as friends, and I love that for them, and I love that they got that chance to see that. And I was thinking that was the same with him and Pilar. Like ultimately, they kind of went back to being friends, and I thought, okay, but like unlike him and Lucy or him and Lake, when they did really start seeing the other person with someone else, it would have been a different type of jealousy type thing playing out. So I actually liked them, and I saw them as in game eventually. I liked that they didn't try to force them back together at that exact moment. But I did think Kim and Pilar were going to be in game. Um, so I liked that. I did. Um, I liked I liked Mama Salazar when she came around. She was hilarious. Like I loved her at the P flag meeting where she was like, "Look here, I'm just gonna call her Karen because I don't know the woman's name. Look here, Karen. It took me longer than 30 seconds. Okay, it took me months."
Yeah, she felt like
So
shit.
I loved her, and then she was just like, but once she jumped on the bandwagon, she was on the bandwagon. I was like, he was like, "Mom, stop! You're like doing way too much," and so I love that. I loved Daddy Salazar. Like I love the parents, and I get their reactions. I know we had some issues with her in the beginning, and the way, but I loved how she came around. Like she was still trying to find her center, but when she came around after going off on the priest, it's like she went out of her way to make sure that they were comfortable. She found a place, she didn't give up her beliefs. She found a place that was inclusive and accepting of her family where they could worship and feel comfortable and all of that. So I did love that part too. um because there are churches out there that are inclusive and accepting, and it shouldn't have to be one or the other. You shouldn't have to be um, gay or bi or whatever and then choose between who you are and your belief system. It's not an either or proposition, or it shouldn't be. So I did love that aspect of it. And I love that she and Victor were getting back to their relationship. So some things where they dropped the ball, some things that they did really, really well, like showing them rebuilding that closeness, rebuilding that bond, getting to know each other again. Her being protective mama bear, um, Papa being protective Papa Bear. I love the fact that Felix's mom, that she didn't relapse. I love the fact that, she, even after her breakup, she still was there for Felix. And she said, "I'm well enough to be your mom now. Let me be your mom." And just that, so I think they did a good job on those aspects. What about you?
I like the dynamics of what the parents brought to this season compared to previous seasons, because I was not a fan of Victor's parents in previous seasons. I did think his mom was too much. And I think it was her guilt in the reason why she was too much. Because when she kind of snapped at the P flag meeting, it was because she was guilty. She was guilty of how long it took her to come around to accepting to accepting Victor and who he is as a person, and just accepting him. And so, that guilt is what kind of like was eating at her for a while, and reason why she went like a whole 180 to the other side. So I definitely get that. I think that the one thing I did not like is the snapping at Pilar without having that conversation with her. And it was like they completely shut their brains off to hearing her, and also forgetting the fact that they were like her when they were teenagers. So it was kind of like, even though y'all got together when y'all was teenagers, y'all got pregnant when y'all were teenagers. I guess, with that, it was just a whole different thing. But I'm like, it never really came into their heads on, hey, our kids are teenagers and they're our kids. So of course they're going to be like us, and they're going to do certain things that we would not necessarily be a fan of, but we have to have like more of an understanding. Or maybe that's just me and my mindset of knowing who I was when I was a teenager. Yeah, I can understand certain things that teenagers do because I was in the same boat at one point. So I do think they went a little too hard at Pilar. Um, and then and then the explanation of why the father was so tough on her. Okay. I love Felix's mom. I loved how she was healthy and she was stable and she was just ready to be his mom. And she was like, I don't need you to take care of me the way I understand, and I completely love it. But I don't need you to take care of me the way that you used to. Like, let me, like you said, let me be the mom for once and to take care of you. And I even like Lake's mom, hearing what when Lake finally stood up and told her mom what was how she felt, and then her mom hearing her and being like, okay, like, I'm definitely going to have to work on that. It's going to be hard, but I'll work on not criticizing you as much. So yeah, I love, ultimately, I really, really like the parents. I thought some of the parents had more development than the kids, in growth, than the kids did, but yeah.
Yeah, I agree. And I agree with you. I think, not being a mom myself, but knowing my mom, and I don't know if it was a single mom thing and there had to be more trust involved, or my mom just being more realistic, and thankful that I was not as bad as she was as a teenager. Like, it was kind of like I said, a lot of my friends considered us to be the black version of the Gilmore Girls. So, um, and looking back, that pretty much was our dynamic. My mom wasn't a teen mom, but she did still have me relatively young versus, and it's just pretty much been her and I my whole life. So, it was a very open relationship, and so, I I kind of understood it, because Victor said himself, Latino parents, especially Latino fathers, are very protective of their daughters. In this case, the mom was more understanding, but I think she just kind of freaked out because of this. And then they had just felt like, she'd been lying to them about what was going on with Felix. So, on one hand, I kind of understand the reaction. And once she calmed down and thought about it, she's the one who told Pilar she could hang out with Raheem, gave her back her phone, and was like, it's okay. I think once she thought about it, she realized that, hey, she actually is being responsible and doing a responsible thing. And I agree with you. So I understand the initial shock of what the fuck did I just find and what is going on. But I think she heard her when she said that she and Felix were not sleeping together, because she loosened up relatively quickly. It was the dad, and you kind of understood where it was coming from. Protective dad, all of that kind of stuff. So, but I, like I said, I applaud her for being Pilar. She was probably the most mature person on the show. I applaud her, and I did like her. I really do love her character. Would have been interesting to see who she ended up with and how she turned out. But so I applaud her for being proactive in her choices and sticking to her guns. And So yeah, I understood it from both standpoint, from both sides. The overprotective dad, and then once he explained why, I got it. You know, and I also understood the choice that Felix made. It wasn't him saying I choose them over you, but he was saying, you know, I understand, but he was just in a very spot. He was in a very tough situation. You get that this is pretty much his family, the only family he'd had, and that they'd been there for him, and he wanted them to accept the relationship. So I felt for him in that situation, and I thought, you know, she could have been a little bit more understanding. But as a 16-year-old girl, you want to be the focus of your boyfriend's world, so it's kind of hard when your family is basically his family. So I mean, but that's why I also say I thought that they probably would have been in game. I hope they would have been in game. But you know, so
Um,
yeah. What about? Huh?
I think so. I am fully on Felix's side on the fact of he did choose her family over her. He did.
Hmm.
But when he explained why he chose her family, she had to understand. Like it was a great, because when he first did it, I got it as when he did it.
I
I
did it
got it
too.
when, huh?
I did too. I understood
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, like as soon as he did it, and she got mad, but I knew why he did it. But when he finally explained it to her, her understanding was great. And understanding the fact of saying, yeah, I'm not saying they're never gonna get back together. I'm sure they will. I'm sure they will, because they had that vibe. They had that vibe. Um, but I am one of those cynics who don't really have that much I guess faith in teenage relationships. I most of them fail, but what I do love is the fact when she finally explained it and she understood it, and she had, like, she embraced him back in knowing what her family meant to him, and how he wouldn't know how to function without having that connection to her family, and her family included her, and she had to understand that, like, it wasn't just her parents or Victor, or her younger brother, who I loved, even though he was not in that many scenes. I loved him still. But I will say that I did love the fact that when he finally explained it, and she got it on him needing her family more than he needed her at that moment in his life.
Yeah. You know, well, teenage relationships, there are very few and far between that last forever. And as a teenager, I remember thinking that my first love, wanting it to last forever. And the part of me that is a romantic, trying to see this future, and reality sets in. It lasted through high school. It even lasted through part of college, but long distance and everything else, a lot of other things get in the way. I get that. Teenage relationships, most of them aren't supposed to last. They're called first loves for something. Relationships are hard no matter the age. And one thing I think kind of does a disservice, and I get it because it's contained world. It are teen shows that show this whole lasting forever, and you go through, and I think it kind of gets us to romanticize some of the stuff, like shows like 90210, the OG version, where they're in high school, then you end up with the same person somehow, magically, mysteriously, with the same person in college, and then the ups and downs, the breakups, and the drama. It's really not supposed to be that hard. So sometimes you gotta just take it for what it's worth as a TV show, but sometimes you want them to be more realistic. Like when sometimes you start off thinking, "Hey, this person is my forever," and you realize that they're not. Like we're maybe better off as friends, or we're not going to be in each other's lives. So I think there should be more of that realism kind of thrown into them a little bit. But yeah. Um. So what? How would you rate? We're gonna do two things, and I know this is gonna be. How would you rate this season?
You're going to be the only one rating the whole show as a whole, right?
I guess.
Yeah. Because I knew you were going to do that. I was like, I refuse to go back and watch the others. Um, but so for this season, while there were some good points, I think the fact that they didn't know that this was the season finale, the series finale, sorry. But also if I'm just rating how the series went without them knowing and how they ultimately ended season 3 of Love, Victor, I was not impressed. And if I didn't already love the series from the first season, I'd have just been watching it just to watch it, rather than to be entertained and, because I love the characters that I already fell in love with. So I am going to rate Love, Victor season 3 with a, oh gosh, I'm like in between two numbers, but I'll go with the higher one. I'll rate it a 3.0, 3 popcorns. I'll give Love, Victor season 3 popcorns. I was just very dissatisfied with it. I will say I hope, I would wish, I really hope, that they could do a wrap-up movie. Hulu and Disney don't really do wrap-up movies, but that's more of a Netflix thing. But I would love it if they could do a wrap-up movie and maybe get us through the end of their high school career, just to kind of see like what the future holds for them as they move on. I think that would have been great because it was just so dissatisfying on how it ended, especially the Benji and Victor thing. It was just anticlimactic, the very, very end. And I thought like they would do like the movie where, like in the Love, Simon movie, where at the end they do the whole Ferris wheel thing, and then they showed a montage at the end with him picking all of them up, and like, okay, he got with the boy and they're still together in high school. And I thought they were going to do a montage because this was the series finale, and I guess they didn't have the opportunity to do that. So it was like nothing, and I was waiting for it, and I was just like, "Oh shoot, that's the end! Like that's it." I was like, "Oh, okay." It was very dissatisfying. So I give it 3 popcorns. What about you?
I give it 3 popcorns too for a lot of same reasons. Like I said, I've never been team Benji as far as him and Victor. They would have had to do a lot more to ultimately convince me to change my mind. I get that was kind of like where they were going with Endgame, but again, um, you got to learn how to treat these characters like living, growing human beings. The story takes you, let the story lead you instead of you trying to lead it. And so this season, like I said, because a lot of that forcedness is what, a lot of his other relationships were so organic. But the one with Benji seemed forced even more than ever. I get that that's whose door you showed up at, but once it didn't quite work out, I think he held on to that whole fantasy of us getting together too long, and that did a disservice. I liked some of the other storylines a little bit more than you did. Um, Andrew and Mia, we're in agreement on it wasn't the best. So I was okay. We were completely okay with her leaving and going her separate way and possibly not being a part of season 4. You could also tell that this was probably not meant to be the season finale, that Hulu just decided somewhere after the season had finished that this was going to be it, which I think does a horrible disservice. I would love to see a wrap up season, a wrap up show, a wrap up movie, but maybe, I don't know, Netflix picking it up or something. I don't know. I just think that it needed a better ending than what it got. And, ending at the Ferris wheel, I think they thought that came full circle. It really didn't. Not for me. Like you said, it was a bit anticlimactic because anyone within a 10-mile radius, anyone with half a brain cell knew Benji was going to end up on that Ferris wheel with them. So, but like I said, I did like some of the development of the other characters. Raheem, I was really interested to see where that went with him and Connor. I think that they did a horrible job with him and Nick. I actually liked Victor and Nick together. So I don't know, but yeah. As far as the series goes, I would overall, because of just everything, how groundbreaking it was. Um, I love the series. As far as the series goes overall, I'm with you. I'm stuck between two numbers, and I think I'm just going to go with the highest one. I would give the series as a whole about a 4. I think they did a good job, considering it started on Disney Plus. It was supposed to be on Disney Plus, and then it went back. It was on Hulu, and so and I congratulate them for not only taking a chance initially on Love Victor, but I also love how they made the family ethnic people of color, how they were a Latino family dealing with this from a conservative small town in Texas moving into the big city. So I loved everything about the premise of the show, about the characters that they were creating and all of that. I just hate that it didn't really, that, this season was kind of a letdown. And sometimes that happens, you get a season that's not always as great on other shows, but I really think that they could have made up for it on season 4, or, some of those things. So, I hate that it went out on not so high of a note for us, but like I said, this show will always hold a special place in my heart for various reasons. Um, so I guess that's about does it. You have anything else you want to add to the Love Victor train?
No, ma'am.
All right. So that does it for this week's episode of the Popcorn Wind Down. Please be sure to listen, like, follow, comment, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify Podcasts, Amazon Podcasts, and as of recently, iHeartRadio Podcasts. You can also keep up to date on the latest in entertainment and pop culture news, as well as other amazing kernels of entertainment, of pop culture goodness at the popcornwinddown.com. That's it. That's the plug. Pop, 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 pop. One day she's going to give me my sound effect. I know she is. Thank you as always, and be sure to join us next week when we discuss. I'm excited about this one. I'm actually surprised you wanted to do this one. This one was
I'm only
your
doing it
idea.
because you're such a fan of his.
Yes, I'll have to tell that story. People flip out when I tell them. But next week we are going to discuss Baz Luhrmann's epic Elvis, and people will get to find out why I am actually an Elvis fan. Don't hate me, But I'm excited to see how that was going to turn out. So I've heard great things about the movie so far. It's going to be long because it's Baz Luhrmann. But until next time, I'm Eddie.
And I'm Tammy. Bye.
Peace.